Hello. Affairs of the Caucasus have never been truly confined to the region itself. And now, with Armenia's parliamentary elections fast approaching, Yerevan having hosted the EPC summit and first ever EU-Armenia summit, and President Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan receiving Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas in Baku, the South Caucasus feels and indeed is one of those geographies where far too much is at stake to be ignored. And the weeks ahead already promise an intensity very much of their own. You're watching Context. I'm Orkhan Amashov here. Joining me now in the studio is Dr. Fariz Ismailzade, member of the Azerbaijani Parliament and Vice Rector of ADA University. Dr. Ismailzade, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. A lot is happening in our region.
Indeed.
Particularly this week we had in Yerevan EPC summit, a summit, and what's very fascinating about that summit is that it would not have happened in Yerevan, would not have taken place there without Azerbaijan-Armenian cooperation. And plus, we remember the first EPC back in Prague 2022, where Azerbaijan and Armenia agreed on the mutual recognition of territorial integrity and sovereignty. What is your broader reflection on that summit?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Indeed, this is a very interesting platform where different countries are coming together, leaders discussing the security issues, political developments. And for Azerbaijan, it has been quite useful platform, as you correctly mentioned. During EPC's previous summits, Ilham Aliyev and Nikol Pashinyan met several times to build trust, to build dialogue, and to discuss some issues. And indeed, it was in Prague summit that, for the first time, Armenia recognized Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. I think that this summit in Yerevan has been quite good because leaders have paid more attention to South Caucasus, European leaders. They discussed the peace process, they discussed the transit issues, energy issues. So South Caucasus is definitely on the agenda of the European leaders, and it is not a coincidence that right after that summit, a number of leaders, as you correctly mentioned, visited Baku. So overall, I think this is drawing more European attention to the region and building more synergy between us. One thing I will say is that Azerbaijan indeed is looking forward to host 2028 EPC summit, and I think this will be a very balanced approach toward what happened in Yerevan and what is expected to happen in Baku.
Yeah, President Aliyev mentioned during his video address to their audience that back in May 2025, Ursula von der Leyen, President of the Commission, and Antonio Costa approached him, asked about the possibility, and he agreed on the basis that Azerbaijan would host the 12th summit, which will be in May 2028. What did you make of President Aliyev's address to the EPC summit? He praised the European Union at large, but particularly was critical of the European Parliament and also Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which is not the institution of the European Union, but outside, but still a European institution. Yeah. What is your reflection on that criticism?
Well, President Aliyev has always been honest and straightforward with our external partners. He believes that European Commission is quite pragmatic and quite useful in building cooperation with Azerbaijan. We have energy issues, we have transport connectivity, we have investments. So European Commission has been helpful to peace process as well, but on the contrary, European Parliament has been actually quite unhelpful to the peace process. They often pass resolutions, 14 resolutions he mentioned, which criticize Azerbaijan unfairly. They put the blame on Azerbaijan, and they actually put the peace process, this fragile peace process, at risk. So therefore, I think he has been quite honest and straightforward, saying what is good from the European partners and what has been unhelpful and hurtful to the peace process.
Yeah, it's very interesting that European Union played an important role in Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. Charles Michel was present back in October 2022 when the Prague Declaration was signed, of course, but European Parliament is a completely different story. Do you think the resolutions of this nature, which are not legally binding, could potentially impact the trust between Azerbaijan and Armenia? Because what Armenia is saying presently is saying that, well, the subject related to the return of former residents of Armenian residents of Karabakh is not on the agenda. They're not really actively talking about those sentenced people here, but Parliament talks. Do you think they could complicate the process between the two countries?
Well, I think in the short run, these resolutions don't mean much because we are not member of European Parliament, so we don't have any obligations. But in the long run, of course, these resolutions are quite hurtful. They misinform the international public, misinform the European public about realities on the ground. They put the blame on Azerbaijan. They hurt EU-Azerbaijan relationships, but they also hurt Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process because basically they give hope to the radicals, to the anti-peace political parties, to revanchists that maybe some sort of a revenge policies are possible. So this is unhelpful to the peace process. There's no place for such resolutions. They don't reflect the reality on the ground because, as you know, more than 1 million Azerbaijanis were expelled, and I don't remember European Parliament passing 14 resolutions on that. So I think that in the long run they are unhelpful and they are hurtful. But I think that we also need to keep in mind that European Parliament consists of various members of Parliament. Some of them are populists, some of them are closely connected to Armenian lobby, some of them are even funded by Armenian diaspora. So unfortunately, these narrow interests are trumping over the European Union's general interest. That is unfortunately the reality.
It's very interesting that during his address, President Aliyev at the very end said that despite all the efforts of those who want to hinder the process, apparently referring to European Parliament as well, Azerbaijan is committed to the peace agenda, and the remarks of my Armenian colleague, namely Prime Minister Pashinyan, clearly demonstrate that. I wish the summit success. Thank you. It looks like Azerbaijan and Armenia on one side, and some elements of European Parliament on the other side. Talking about the peace process and also the crucial, pivotal elections in Armenia on the 7th of June, what do you make of this conversation surrounding Russian hybrid threat? Because European Union established a new mission, it's called EU Partnership Mission, and there is an explicit reference to Russian hybrid threat. What is it and how dangerous is it?
Yeah, as you know, these parliamentary elections is going to be tough for Pashinyan government because opposition, radical opposition, which is anti-peace, which is revanchist type of opposition, they are trying to unite forces with certain diaspora groups, with the church, with some groups that are linked to Russian business society. I think all of them are trying to unite against Pashinyan, and they're going to try to win the elections and therefore stop the peace process. I think that some of the campaign elements will be online. I mean, with the use of social media, trying to brainwash population, and then some fake news, attacks on on virtual space. So that is exactly what Europeans are trying to help the government of Armenia to prevent such kind of threats coming from fake media sources, coming from some business groups that are funding such kind of fake attacks and informational attacks, hybrid attacks, cyber attacks. I think that is the main purpose, to make sure that elections are held in line with regulations and rules without interference of outside actors through virtual space, through hybrid attacks. And I think that is important because in many countries, external actors have ruined the process or have interfered with the process with the help of these kind of hybrid attacks.
It's very fascinating that the elections are incredibly important, of course, but we talk about Russian hybrid threat, but quite often some elements of that threat are not necessarily based in Russia. There are some,
absolutely, in different capitals and even among radical diaspora. Pashinyan right now is for peace, but radical diaspora, Armenian diaspora, is anti-peace. So they are actually hurting the Armenia's future in that way.
One more question about the latest summit. We know that France played an important role in terms of generating this idea. France was at the very heart at the beginning, and President Macron was sort of dominating the landscape in Yerevan. He also tried, by the way, I think yesterday, at the end of his state visit to Armenia, to cross the land border to Turkey, yes, but failed to do so. We all understand that Turkish-Armenian normalization is connected with the Azerbaijani peace process, and border is closed. I think the latest agreement says that it will be open in the fullness of time for third-party nationals and diplomatic passport holders, but it's kind of closed. What do you think he tried to achieve by that movement?
Well, I think for many years European politicians have been pressuring Turkey to open the border, and they were trying to disconnect the Turkish-Armenian border issue from the peace process in Karabakh. I think this symbolic gesture by Macron to cross the border was part of that general attempt to show to the world that the border is gradually opening, that there is already passage, that Turkey is amending its policy or softening its policy. So there are a lot of symbolic gestures like that or pressures like that, trying to somehow, I would even say, put a divide between Turkey and Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan has always linked the peace process to the border issue. So by trying to open the border or push Turkey to open the border, they're trying to put the divide between Turkey and Azerbaijan.
It's very interesting that on the 5th of May, if memory serves me correctly, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was here, That was a very important visit to the region, of course. So we had French president paying a state visit to Armenia and Italian prime minister paying an official visit, working visit to Azerbaijan. Do you see any Italo-Franco competition in this region in that regard?
Well, I mean, those countries always compete with each other in terms of trade and economic opportunities, but in this particular case, they just have different agendas. Macron and French government, they focus on politics more. They focus on supporting Armenian agenda, Armenian diaspora's agenda, so they're focused on politics. Italian government is more focused on economy, trade, connectivity, energy, now also talking about defense industry more and more. So I think that they just have different focuses. I mean, traditionally, of course, they have competition with each other, but on the topic of South Caucasus, they just have different focuses. And we appreciate Italian approach because they are more pragmatic, more focused on bilateral win-win relationships. What is good for both of us, both for Italy, for Azerbaijan. So that was a great visit, I believe.
Now, what do you make of the UK position? Because you also, as a member of Azerbaijani Parliament, you're chairman of the Azerbaijan-UK Interparliamentary Group, or Friendship Group, which is called All-Party Parliamentary Group in the UK. How do you gauge the UK's approach? Because the UK is competing naturally with France, practically everywhere, including South Caucasus. They got sort of some practical, pragmatic understanding with Italians. How do you evaluate their position to this situation?
Well, as you know, from 1990s, Britain has been a very active player in Azerbaijan, and BP was the largest investor. So traditionally, Britain has been extremely active and engaged in South Caucasus, particularly in Azerbaijan with multi-billion dollar investments. These days, the UK is trying to increase their cooperation with Azerbaijan to the level of strategic partnership. They offered it, and that would include not only energy but also some new areas such as renewable energy, AI, technology, defense industry, and education, of course. So I think UK has been traditionally very pragmatic, very focused on bilateral benefits, and they will continue doing so in the future as well.
Back to the EU-Armenia bilateral summit. I mean, we know that EPC would not have happened in Armenia without Azerbaijan-Armenian cooperation, but EU-Armenia bilateral summit would have happened even without Azerbaijan. But although we may say that the war of 2020 gave Armenia that realization that they should diversify away from Russia, and perhaps today's strategic dialogue has its roots in that desire to diversify away. Azerbaijan consistently criticized EU for not having balanced approach to Armenia and Azerbaijan. We know that there are some problems regarding their border mission, which should withdraw after the ratification. But regarding this EU partnership mission, do you think Azerbaijan will find anything problematic there? Because they're going to be a 2-year mission. It will be operational after the 7th of June elections. We remember when the strategic agenda was adopted in December 2025, Azerbaijan had some reservations regarding the subject of Karabakh there. Basically, the question is very basic. Is there anything in the EU-Armenia strategic dialogue that Azerbaijan could be or should be concerned about?
Yeah, generally we have witnessed that EU-Armenia partnership is growing over the past 5 years, and a lot of times we witness, let's say, unbalanced economic, humanitarian, defense assistance from Brussels to Armenia. We believe that's not fair because the money that Yerevan is getting from European Union, even if it's receiving this money, let's say for economic reasons or humanitarian reasons, that means that they are saving money in their budget for defense purchases, defense industry. So we are concerned about that. We believe that basically, in a way, Brussels is subsidizing the defense capabilities of Armenians. They are subsidizing the weapons purchasing of Armenia. Sometimes, actually, we see that the amount of money that Yerevan is getting is several times higher than what is proposed to Baku. So this is concerning, and we are also concerned about the fact that sometimes this sign of friendship and sign of fraternity is showing unhealthy developments, when it comes to blame game, blaming Baku, or putting all the blame on Baku. So sometimes it's just beyond the EU-Armenia relationship. They start, attacking Azerbaijan, and sometimes they make some political statements against Azerbaijan. So we hope that these cooperation will stay within, normal boundaries, pragmatic boundaries, nothing extraordinary, nothing that will upset Azerbaijan, and hopefully EU will treat both Azerbaijan and Armenia in an equal way.
Well, EU recently, Enlargement Commissioner Martikov suggested quadrilateral format involving Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey and the European Union as a recognition of the diplomatic reality, referring to the peace process and potential Turkish-Armenian normalization. But Georgia seems to be a sideline. You have written extensively about the House of Caucasus, regional dynamics here. Azerbaijan is fully supportive of Georgia's regional ambitions in many ways. What do you make of this effort, consistent, persistent effort by the EU to sideline Georgia, limit its influence, and give the importance to Azerbaijan-Armenia-related construction?
Yeah, unfortunately, things between Tbilisi and Brussels have got worse in the last several years, and that's mainly for political reasons, because still on connectivity issues, on energy issues, on transport corridors, Georgia plays a very important role. In fact, it's one of the critical, transit countries. So on practical level, importance of Georgia still remains. But, some people in Brussels, they are so much driven by, topics of elections, topics of political agenda. They forget about the other issues, economic issues, energy issues. They are so much focused on elections and civil society issues. They are they believe this is the only agenda that should exist. So therefore, they are pushing for some sort of harsh policies against Tbilisi. I personally believe that there is no necessity for that. I believe that EU should reconsider its policy towards Georgia, should try to open up the dialogue, because Georgians are generally interested in deepening relationship with EU, but such kind of attacks, such kind of pressures, sometimes they are overdoing it, I believe. I believe that Europeans are overdoing it, and I think that they should open a new chapter in bilateral relationship.
My last question, Dr. Ismailzade, just as the 2024 October elections in Georgia were deeply geopolitical, with EU and other Western institutions actively supporting opposition. Similar pattern relates to the Armenian elections, yes. Deeply geopolitical, but on this particular occasion, of course, incumbent government is being supported. Yes. In the unlikely case, very unlikely case of Prime Minister Pashinyan losing that election, what will be the EU's approach to Armenia, you think?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that unlike Georgian elections, here in Yerevan elections, we also witness the battle between peace and anti-peace agenda, because we are talking not only about those who are supporting European values and those who are supporting maybe more closer alignment with Russia, but also peace and anti-peace agenda. So that's making it even more complicated. Well, we'll see what the results come out, but definitely I think that European leaders, European Commission will not tolerate any kind of, let's say, situation where anti-peace radicals or revanchists, they gain upper ground, they hurt the situation in the South Caucasus, they try to hurt the peace process. I think that EU will, and that is the purpose of that monitoring mission, or partnership mission, is that to make sure that all these anti-peace radical elements do not have any advantage over social media, over virtual space, over electronic media. So that I think that European Union will provide all possible support to government as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Ismail. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
A lot is happening, a lot to dissect and analyze and contemplate about. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, just 1 month remaining until the crucial parliamentary elections in Armenia. It's not merely the political future and fate of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan that is hanging in the balance, but the direction of Armenia itself, and by extension, the trajectory of the wider South Caucasus. You've been watching Context. I'm Orkhan Amashov, and see you very soon indeed.